Okay, I think we're good to go, Chelsea.
Okay, very good. Lots of new names for me here. So hi to those of you that I haven't met. You are being recorded, just so that everybody knows the webinar is being recorded. During this session, we would also like to open it up to make sure that you can put questions into the chat. We will review those questions and try and leave some time at the end to be able to answer everything that you need. So to start out, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. This is the first webinar of the series, so we're very happy that you're here with us. This is a part of a project called the Methodology for Coordinated Investor Relations in Health and Life Sciences. It is a joint cluster collaboration between the 5 clusters that you see here: the Life Science Cluster, the Norwegian Smart Care Cluster, Norway Health Tech, Oslo Cancer Cluster, and not least, Biotech North. This is a project that started just about a year ago. We'll tell you a little bit about what this project is, but I would like to introduce myself. My name is Chelsea Ranger. In this context, I am working with the Life Science Cluster. My focus is investor relations and business development, background in medicine, and 10+ year history in the industry. Together with me today presenting this topic is Hanne-Mette. Do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I'm Hanne-Mette Christensen. I'm the head of the Life Science Cluster. And together with Chelsea, we are hosting this seminar on behalf of the clusters. From my own side, I have a master in biochemistry and immunology, and also a master of technology management, as I very quickly transferred over to industry. So I have approximately 30 years experience from the industry and approximately 25 years experience from BD, business development, which it means an investor work from different angles. So I've been a part of starting several companies and CEO of 3 biotech companies, among certain things I've done. So that's a brief intro for now.
Thank you. Yes, okay, so let's get started. I want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about, for those of you who aren't familiar with each of the clusters and why it is that we might be working together. Some of you might have heard of a project called USA Next, which just finished in December, which was the first ever joint cluster collaboration where we had 4 of the 5 clusters working together on finding methodologies for supporting Norwegian entities who are interested in mobilizing to the US market. This is an expansion where we're now taking a look at how can we all work together in a coordinated way to better expose our ecosystem to not only our home investors within Norway and the Nordics, but also to the international financial community. Our clusters are synergetic in many ways. We overlap in some, but we also are very different in some of the things that we focus on. The Life Science Cluster is very much focused on biotechnology, from health, tech, marine, and agriculture. Biotech North is also within the life science space within marine health and agriculture. Norway Health Tech, as many of you might know, digital health, med tech, and hospital solutions are a core focus. Oslo Cancer Cluster, of course, works heavily within the oncology space, crossing many sectors: therapeutics, diagnostics, and digital. And not least, Smart Care Cluster, working within welfare technology, digital technology, medical technology, home care. So together, we represent approximately 500 separate entities. We have different investors that we might be speaking to. Some of those might be overlapping as well. We're seeing that increasingly. But it's very important that we as an ecosystem throughout the entirety of Norway, to the best of our ability, are working in a coordinated way towards the financial community. We have a number of partners that we are working with in this project, so many of these that you will recognize. But why are we doing this? I think it's important to know this sets the background for many of the webinars that you'll see beyond this one today. Investors have a big job, right? So to come into an underexplored territory, or for them potentially an unexplored territory, they need to understand their entry points before they can understand which companies they should be attracting or reaching out to. So we are trying to build a methodology to ensure that we have a very clean pathway to communicating with our investors, not running in parallel necessarily. We want to build trust. We want to build long-term relationships. We want to be seen as a professional ecosystem. So a lot of this is going to revolve around some of the techniques that we use in internal communication within our ecosystem, also external communication with the outside ecosystem, and in ensuring that we are working with you, the company's founders on the ground, to make sure that we are providing you with the tools and the networks necessary to make sure that you can proceed in your journey. So we have decided to start here with this webinar, but there will be webinars coming. The dates may be subject to change, so this is a tentative plan as of right now, where we hope to speak about trends in the investments that we're seeing in health and life science, types of funding, what types of funding you should be seeking and when, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of different types, how to build a funding strategy, why would you need it, what does it actually look like, understanding different sector investors and how their mindsets might be the same or different depending on the areas they serve. Valuation and cap tables, understanding what are founder-friendly terms. And one of our favorites, Hanametta and I, knowing what you don't know. I think that's a very fun thing. We're constantly finding out that there's more things that we don't know. So that sets the stage for today. How to prep for partnering. Which is our way of working best practice in BD conferences. BD, as we understood, is not a ubiquitous term that everybody knows. So BD stands for business development. You will see another one, IR, for investor relations. So that will come up. And why do we think it's important to focus on this particular type of conference? Because not all conferences are created equal. Many of us who have a background in the scientific community or research community, we're very comfortable with those types of conferences. This operates really differently. Partnering is fast-paced. It requires a different type of approach. It's very helpful if you've understood the methodology well in advance so that you can use these tips and tricks to prepare yourself as best as possible. And there are ways that you can really maximize potential success. And there are very good things that can come out of these conferences, but only if you know what you're doing. And partnering meetings are a different style of conference, right? So these are not academic conferences. They might have an academic track or a posters track or something within, but this is a business development and an investor focused type of meeting. They are very structured. So these are not necessarily your organic meetings. You'll have organic meetings in the evening events when you're having a glass of wine. Otherwise, everything throughout the day is very structured. And they are almost entirely focused on generating business or having a very concrete ask, partnering ask. To give you some examples of what some of these conferences are, this is just a handful, but these are some of the well-known ones within particularly the biotech, diagnostics, drug development space. Swiss Nordic Bio is coming up actually on March 7th. This is a one-day event that will happen in Switzerland that has a very focused investor related meeting place, but also a number of license and BD personnel from the pharmaceutical industry. You have LSX, which has historically been an investor-based conference, not necessarily focused on one-to-one partnering. However, they have recently partnered, as I've understood, with an entity called Informa, which is behind the BioEurope conferences, which means they are now going to be utilizing the same partnering format. So that's good to know for those of you who have been to LSX before. We have BioEurope, which has both a spring and an autumn event. The spring has fewer people. It's always located in Southern Europe. The autumn event is always somewhere usually around Austria, Northern Germany. And that happens in usually the first week of November. This year, incidentally, it will be in Stockholm. So that's a good thing for those of you to know. We also have Nordic Life Science Days, which happens annually. They just had their 10th anniversary in November in Copenhagen. This year it will be in Malmö, Sweden, in September, earlier this year. And then not least, we have Bio. I mentioned Bio last. It happens in June, so it's not the last one this year, but it is the largest. So this has approximately 14,000 people from all over the industry and all over the world who join this particular conference. And what is the breakdown? So this is just an example from One BioEurope from last year, where you get an idea here of how many people are coming from biotech, which is 44% here, from pharma, which is your 22%, versus who's coming from your finance, R&D, professional services, public and nonprofits. You also can see here that it's very heavy on the top management or senior management side. That's important to know. And then for Bio Europe, of course, it's going to be heavy on the European representation. However, in Bio, you're probably going to find an equal amount of US representation. Okay, let me step back here. Just want to pause here for a second. Historically, these have all been really appropriate conferences for those who are in drug development or some form of biotechnology and diagnostics. However, as we are seeing sector convergence in our industry, we're seeing that represented within these conferences as well. So there are now heavily dedicated tracks that are for medtech or for digital health. And of course, we're seeing pharma uptake in a number of digital and technological services now more than ever. So I don't know if this will apply to all of you, but hopefully for those of you who are here, it does apply. So how these partnering meetings differ. So one of the main things about partnering meetings is that this is based on a system, right? So Bio, the largest conference I mentioned, they have a one-on-one partnering system. And then you have EBD Group behind all of your Bio Europe conferences. They have their own system. The system is structured so that if you have 4,000 or 14,000 people attending, that they each can manage their calendars and their availabilities, and the system will automatically match people who are hoping to meet based upon those availabilities. So they do the legwork for you. That's one of the best assets of a partnering conference, is as long as you do your due diligence and find who you want to meet, the system will create that availability. This is going to be very much focused on industry insights, understanding how the industries are working. There will be some tracks that are very specific to therapies or products, but it's also very much to understand what's happening in the broader respect of the industry. This is intended if you are looking for partnerships, if you're looking to license something, if you're looking to find an investor, if you're looking for a specialized service that will help you propel a development program, this is where you're going to find them. These are high-touch events, meaning that you can do a lot within a short amount of time. It's not uncommon to hear people go to a 3 or 4 day event and say that they've had 25 meetings. Now, that doesn't mean that 25 meetings result in a business deal, but it does mean that you can do a lot in a short amount of time. The return of investment is high. One business deal, if you're looking for the right business deal, can make up the effort that you put in paying for these conferences. They are a bit expensive. It is corporate speed dating. So the goal is not to land a deal on site. The goal is to show up and make a good relationship in a very short amount of time and see if you can get a second date. So when we talk about how we want to start out on a good foot to get a good date, there's 5 steps in the process that I like to recommend. It includes preparing in advance, and I'll show you what that means. Leveraging the system to your advantage. Keeping your requests personal, knowing what the etiquette is of these 30-minute meetings, and knowing how to follow up properly. So if we start here, preparing in advance. What this means is when you're going to a partnering conference, you've identified exactly which conference you're going to, you know why you're going there, you have a goal with that conference. So if you are trying to find a specific investor, you know that. If you need a pharmaceutical partner for something, you know that in advance, right? When you go into the system, you're going to have access to the profiles of, let's give Nordic Life Science Days as an example. This past year, they had approximately 1,800 attendees. I think that was around 800 companies. So you have the profiles of 800 companies and 1,800 attendees. And it's your job to do the due diligence to find the right companies and the right people that are specific to you. Not everybody will be as clean on their profile as they should be, ideally. So then it's up to you to hopefully be that person who is clean on your profile, but then do your due diligence by going to the websites to really understand who you're asking to join you for a meeting. And I'll explain later why that's important. And then request early. I hear a lot of people say that they've decided in the week before BioEurope or the week before NLS days that they've decided to go. And I have to say, for the money that you spend, that's really to your disadvantage to do it that way. The partnering system opens up for meeting requests to start being made, usually 6-8 weeks or more in advance of the actual event. So that means you have plenty of time to really do your due diligence and understand who you want to meet, write those personalized meeting requests, and send all of that out. If you do that in advance, you're more likely to get a hit. What I mean by a hit is if you're a top pharmaceutical company and you're going to one of these conferences and you know everybody wants to meet you, it's not uncommon to get 400, 700, 900 meeting requests, right? You want to be the one that stands out. So when we move forward and we go to how you leverage the partnering system. So this is how you're showing off yourself in the best way that you can on paper, right? Your profile should be very thorough. If you have documents that you can upload, anything that you can tell, links that you can make, all of those things are very important to flesh out your profile. Please always make sure that it's non-confidential. I think that's important to say. You will get a schedule, you'll get a calendar, right? Your calendar will block you off usually every 30 minutes is how they structure it. You want to open up as much time on your calendar as possible so that hopefully your availabilities match with those of the people that you want to meet. Don't do the rookie mistake and forget to block off time to have coffee or bathroom breaks or lunch. I have personally done that. That's not fun. There are lots of different ways to search within these partnering systems where you can use keywords, right? Let's say that you are a specific type of diagnostic in oncology, since I'm looking at a face who I know is in that space. You know exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for a specific type of therapeutic, a specific type of diagnostic, so you can search on those keywords. Kind of fun to note, every time somebody updates their profile, they are moved up to the top of the search list. So that's a good tip for those of you who want to be at the top of the search list. Go in and make a little positive update every day, and then you're the first company that everybody sees. Okay, so here is, this is me. This is when I was with Sweden Bio working for Nordic Life Science Days. So you see that I have a personal profile here, and you see that behind me, the organization has its own profile. This is an example of a partnering system, right? And you can see how much information we have put in about the organization, as well as how much information I've put in about myself. I always connect to LinkedIn. I always connect to websites. You can also see that there's lots of different documents that have been updated here. Now, again, these are all non-confidential documents related specifically to what it is that we're trying to show off, what it is that we're trying to sell, what it is that we're trying to partner, okay? Definitely nothing non-confidential. I have to say that because it happens. This is a typical calendar, right? So you get these meeting spaces here every 30 minutes, and then you can block off. You can see where I've put I'm not available, and you can see where I have dragged different things from the conference program into my calendar that I want to use. And you can see where I've left available spaces. So this is an example. And I think that's where we are right now. I'm actually going to hand this over to Hanna-Mette.
Thank you, Chelsea. I will continue on the 5 bullet point list that Chelsea mentioned initially. And when you are reaching out to companies, it is very important that you also do your own assessment of the companies that you would like to reach out to. So this is also part of your own business development strategy or investor strategy. So you should actually look into which investors are most relevant for you. Which do you think are interesting for your company to have, and actually research that they are interested in the field or the area that you are working in. If they're not, it's actually polite both to the investor and to yourself to not spend time on convincing them to change or expand areas. It can sometimes be what should I say, unntak så bekrefter regelen in Norwegian. But in general, really do a good due diligence on the interests of the investors. And also then be personal. Make sure that your request to the person you want to meet stands out, and that you can see that it's actually made from you to that organization. If it looks a lot like kind of a mass email, you're often not reaching up. That does mean, however, that you could choose to make kind of a standard text describing yourself and what you want, because you have some interests in, for instance, partnering with a pharmaceutical company for preclinical or clinical collaborations. You are interested in a med tech company for collaborations, or investors for dialogues. So you kind of have some boxes that you could fit your template text into, and then you tailor it to each single organization you want to meet. Takes more time, but also gives more success. Also, it is very okay to decline requests in this kind of partnering systems. Sometimes you feel bad because you decline a lot of requests, or you keep them open because you kind of feel bad for declining a request. In these partnering systems, there's a lot of different kinds of companies. Some of those who very often send out a lot of requests are companies providing services. And if you're not particularly interested in services at this conference, it's actually very polite to send an email or a response saying that and declining the meeting, because these companies also actually have kind of a limit of the requests they can have open. So if you turn it down, they can ask new requests to target their target groups. Also, of course, you would like to target the head, for instance, of a pharmaceutical BD licensing team. But again, bear in mind that this person maybe gets a lot of requests. So finding someone with special interests in your area in a team could be a better opening for actually getting an agreement. It is very usual to get approximately 10% acceptance on your meetings. As Chelsea mentioned, the investors or the pharma BD people, they get hundreds of requests at these meetings. So early requests, personal requests that are very clear on what you want to achieve or why you are asking for a meeting, are more likely to get a positive response. And also, if you don't get a positive response from someone you really, really want to talk to, very often some of these people are speaking at program slots. They are, of course, hanging around the coffee table as well. So if you know them, or if you would like to know them, find a picture, and then you keep your eyes open in the informal areas. And then you present yourself. And if you get a small dialogue going, you have started a relationship also. And then also the meeting etiquette for the meeting. So now you have done a lot of preparations. You have a list of, as Chelsea said, maybe 20 to 25 meetings. Chelsea had a picture of these hallways with one-on-one rooms. There are 30 minutes allocated to each meeting. That means that you have 25 minutes for a meeting, and then 5 minutes for moving to the next one. And of course, what you want in that meeting is not necessarily to just pour out of you all the information you have about your project. You want to initiate a dialogue. You want to be one of those companies that the partner remembers when they wake up the day after. This company or this project was very interesting. I think I'll follow up on that one. So that's what you're supposed to achieve in the meeting. So it needs to be a presentation which has, of course, a high quality, very to the point. Some suggestions are bullet point listed here. You should, of course, use your standard presentation. You should have standard presentations for versatile use, to put it that way, but you should format it to this opportunity or this conference or what you want to achieve. If you are meeting, for instance, medtech, pharma, licensing departments, or investors, you should have potentially 2 different types of presentations, a little bit tailored to the kind of partner you're meeting. And if you are on a kind of a repeat meeting with some of these on updates, you should have very tailored updates to meet the dialogue that you want to initiate through these meetings. We're often also, just one more comment. Yeah, well, it's kind of the same on these 2. So go ahead, Chelsea. The point with this meeting, it's to get the next meeting. Very often you hear people talking about pitching. We are very often talking about investor dialogues. So we want you companies to think about and prepare for a successful first meeting. So if you actually have a good pitch and the investor says yes, you should be prepared for what a dialogue looks like. Very often you need 4 or 5 meetings before you actually get an agreement on some level. So this is a continuous process, and also building of a relationship and building of trust. So to the timing of the meeting, have a mutual intro, approximately 5 minutes, 10-minute presentations for both parties, which is approximately 20 minutes, and then next steps, approximately 5 minutes. And then you see it's actually 30 minutes already, so you have even less than 2 times 10 minutes for the presentations. So ideally, you should actually be finished with presentations after approximately 15 minutes, and then have a dialogue with the party, having the opportunity to exchange some thoughts and kind of looking each other in the eye. That makes more of a relationship building than just peppering out a presentation. So now we have commented from our side a lot of things and tips and tricks to do. And then there are, of course, some things you shouldn't do. Some are very obvious, but then also sometimes you do things with a good thinking behind it, but it can be perceived as, for instance, annoying, like spamming for meetings. If it's an investor that has said already that your project is out of scope, don't initiate the dialogue too early. If you see that they are changing scope, it's good to ask whether they could be interested, but accept the no from those who are not interested. That actually also helps you to lead the interest to those who are interested. And there's a huge group of investors and partners out there. So try and focus your interest building on those who are interested in your fields. As mentioned, also over presenting. Try and keep to a point that gains their interest and creates an interest to follow up later. Also, it's might seem as a strange balance, but of course not sharing confidential info. But once you get the hang of it, you can share quite a lot of information without it being confidential. If you're uncertain of what the party you are meeting are interested in seeing, you could also put some things to an appendix and jump to it if they ask. So sometimes, for instance, an investor are not particularly interested in seeing your slides on the indication you have chosen, once you actually have shown them that you have slides on indication. So that indicates that you know what you're talking about, but very likely they know a lot more. So once they have seen you have them, they're kind of not interested, which is an interesting balance. They see that the quality is good enough, and then they want to jump to the technology. Showing up late or unprepared, of course, that's not how you build a lasting relationship. And then if you really need to use your phone for something, apologize and tell them why. So those are some do's and don'ts from our sides here. So in these meetings and this meeting series, we really want to share some of our thoughts and views, but we also would like the ecosystem and you guys to share some thoughts and views. So if any of you have been thinking about some ideas as we have been talking from our side, feel free to raise your hand and also come with some input.
Can you see the hands on the Mette?
Yes, I can. Eirik?
Yes, thank you for a very interesting talk. I just had some comments. I agree that one of the most common mistakes is probably to start planning too late and to come with meeting requests too late, because the big players are really busy and they might be occupied if you're a bit too late by booking the meetings. And I was going to ask you if you have some best practice on materials. Should you bring one-pagers materials to leave after the meeting, or what do you think?
I can answer from my own experience at least. So, and a good question, because we didn't cover that. So always follow up. That's very important. Nowadays, people don't take paper material. So if you have 20 minutes, 20 meetings, bring 2. And then you can actually show them in the meeting and they will say, oh, that's a really nice one. Could you send it in digital? And then within the week following the conference, or optimally the first days after you return, follow up on these meetings with short or longer comments, depending on how it has gone, but just to show them that you are following up on the relationships. Chelsea, any additional viewpoints from your side?
Yeah, 2. So one I would say is there's a transition happening right now with business cards. Many of you on the tech side probably already know this, but I was really surprised when I went to NLS Days in November and saw how many people have abandoned business cards and are using these digital apps now for scanning directly to LinkedIn or directly putting the business card contact into their contact information. So, you know, the conferences are in general making a sustainability push, which means anything on paper is not loved as much anymore, even at the booths. So that's one thing. On the follow-up, I think one thing that's really important to understand, particularly if you're going to meet an investor, right? These conference seasons are generally quite condensed, right? So you usually find a conference season that hits around February, March. You have another conference season that hits in June. You have another conference season that hits in the autumn. A lot of these investors end up doing 3 to 4 conferences back to back, right? Which means if they're doing partnering conferences back to back, they're getting these 500 requests for each of these. And then many times, if they're not accepting the meeting with you at the conference because their schedule's already booked, what they'll do is they'll say, here's my email, contact me outside of this. So then they've also got all of the extras to follow up on of the people that they didn't meet at the conference who they still want to meet. That being said, if you go to follow up with somebody after a conference and you don't hear back from them within a week to 2 weeks, that doesn't mean that you're forgotten. It may mean at some point after a few weeks that you want to send a gentle reminder. But I can tell you from the meetings that I've had just now in November, I'm just having people now reply to me. That's how backed up they are. So you didn't get lost necessarily, just so you know.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Annette?
Hi, I really want to thank you for this presentation. I have some experience with partnering meetings like this through the Nordic Life Science Days and also through the Spark program. For me, I think it has been really a steep learning curve to understand how much you should prepare for these meetings. That is really, really time consuming, and to make sure that you set off enough time to do that properly. On the other hand, you get a lot out of it if you really have been able to prepare and understand also that, sometimes it's different pitches, different things you want to tell the different actors or the different people you are meeting with. And also, I think it's important also to understand that even though you are not successful with getting a second meeting, at least not for this time, then try still to make the best out of it. Try to ask them then why, what do they want to see, how do they, and take the feedback that you get and put that then into your second pitch or into your second meeting, so that you try to all the time adapt to the feedback that you get.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And on the topic of feedback, I think this is one of the fun things about this conference. And Annette, we've been in some of these meetings together. So I think we've had our own learnings about this, but you get the opportunity to do a micro pitch and to get immediate feedback. That also can be very telling, right? Because you have somebody who's coming with fresh eyes, and they've never heard you pitch before. And if you take their response in clear reflection, you can really understand, number one, how good is your pitch? Number two, what's missing from your pitch, right? So there's lots of things that can be inferred from what is said or not said or reverted back to you incorrectly. So these are quite fun, even if it's not necessarily about the business deal that you make in the meeting. There's a lot of learnings to be had regardless.
There's also one thought I had on that perspective as well, and that is the value of specialist investors. Because the reason you go to this kind of conferences is that you would like some investors who are specialists and who also are the ones that could be likely to join your company as investors for the next stage. And if you are looking at general technology, very often if you have an investor, they are with you for developing and market entry. That is generally not what it looks like in life sciences and health technologies. So for the IT solutions, it's shorter development times, this area wise. Medical technologies a bit longer, diagnostics a bit longer, and drugs even longer. And also bioindustrials have varied development routes like this. That also means that you need investors that can support you in different maturity stages. And there's a value of investors and meeting investors at this kind of conferences also, which goes to building relationships with investors earlier than you need them. So you have to plan forward. So if you see that there are some investors that are playing in your field, but you know that at the stage you're at right now, they wouldn't be interested. They might, however, be interested once you reach some milestones 1 or 2 years from now. In these cases, you could actually use the partnering system and tell them that I am a very early stage company. I'm working in this field that I know you're interested in. I know that you have invested in company XYZ, or that you have a lot of knowledge, and I would like to ask you 2 questions. Sometimes they actually do put time for that kind of meetings in their schedules. And with that also, it's actually a kind of a low threshold meeting, because they're not supposed to say no to you. You're just supposed to have a dialogue. And sometimes those kinds of meetings are excellent for starting out relationships. So next time you actually need to present them something that they should reflect upon, you have already established a connection with them. Any other comments from anyone?
Lena just asked a question, whether or not anyone has good experience with having a joint Norwegian stand at the conference. Well, we can talk to this one.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to do it, or you want me to do it?
Yeah, you could, and both of us can cover this quite well. So joint Norwegian and joint Nordic, actually. Nordic. So you could start to the joint Norwegian one, Chelsea.
Yeah. Yeah, so Nordic Life Science Days is, I'll briefly give you a little bit of an idea about what this is. Nordic Life Science Days is a conference that was started by the Sweden Bioindustry Organization. It's been running now, it's in its 11th year, very focused originally on Sweden, bit of Denmark, very drug development, heavy on the oncology, neurology side. That has grown. So now what you see is the full breadth of representation across all of our sectors, with parallel tracks running in tech, tracks that are dedicated to investors, startup pitching. The exhibition has gotten bigger and now is very comprehensive on the Nordic side. So we do have a Norwegian booth each year that has, I think this past year we had close to 15 different entities that contributed to building this Norwegian pavilion. And that was quite wonderful, actually, in doing that, because that gave a very centralized place where Norwegian companies could come and bring and sit and have their meetings there. But it also gives us a really strong, nice space within a Nordic context, which I think is very important. And it for us, has us as an ecosystem looking nice and comprehensive. Then you as a company, of course, have many boots on the ground there to support you, because we as support entities are all present. But as Hanne-Mette said, we've done this on a Nordic level as well, which I'll let her tell you about, because that's also been very important.
Yes, so when we are in Norway, in Sweden, Denmark, or in the Nordics, having a Nordic pavilion is not necessarily that important. Then we are kind of profiling Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and the countries separately. But once we get out of the closest ecosystems, going to the US, for instance, it makes sense to profile as the Nordics. And for 5 years, we have had a joint pavilion at the Bio International Conference, which goes in the US each year. There also was a Nordic or Scandinavian pavilion some 15 years back, which grew to huge sizes and required a lot of cost contribution from the small companies. So it kind of died off because it became too large. So now we have had focus on having a suitably small Nordic pavilion, and had that for 5 years. And at the Bio International Conference, it means that if you don't have a pavilion, you don't really have a natural meeting place for the Nordic ecosystem being present. So one thing is the visual side of having a joint pavilion being visible from the outsiders. The other side is having a place to actually meet your Norwegian friends, your Nordic friends, and a lot of the interactions between Nordic companies are initiated at that kind of conferences, and also a lot of the interaction between the industry supporters, as our organizations are initiated and developed through those kinds of collaborations. And also at this kind of meetings, it's not necessarily the pavilion which it brings the value to each single small company or single company. It is the one-on-one partnering. But having the partnering, the contents of the conference and the pavilion really gives this kind of a broad visibility.
Can I do something? We have about 8 minutes left. I don't see any more new questions coming into the chat, but we do have 54 of you still online. So one thing that I would like to do is I want to see a show of hands. Does everybody know where the hand raise button is? Everybody look for your hand raise button. I want to ask a couple of questions just to gauge a couple of things. Okay, we gotta take your hands down until I ask the question. Okay, here we go. How many of you have been to a partnering conference? Okay. Getting a few here. Okay, we're almost at half. All right, very good. So we have about 18. How many of you are planning to fundraise in 2024? Yeah. So we're at half. Cool. Okay, so now I'm gonna find out those of you who answered that you are fundraising. Okay, everybody take your hands down. Very good. Those of you who answered that you are fundraising, are you the ones who have been to the partnering conferences? Close. Okay, so there's a few. There's a gap there. Some of you have not yet been to the partnering conferences and you're fundraising. May or may not be a fit, but the reason that I wanted to ask this question is because a lot of people who are not specifically in, for example, drugs, diagnostics, within this particular biotech space, they have questions as to whether or not these conferences are relevant for them. And I can tell you, I can't answer that. What I can tell you is that it's important to take a look at these conferences for a couple of reasons. If you understand your customer base and you have a wide breadth of a customer base or a wide breadth of needs, it's very often and very likely that you'll meet these here. The other side is the investor side of it. I think the investment landscape is really interesting right now, has been for the past few years as we've seen this sort of sector convergence, but particularly right now when we're seeing, again, an uptick in how investors are behaving. We have a number of investors who have either raised singular funds with broad focuses, where they have included both biotech and different types of hardware or digital tech. But we're also seeing parallel funds that are being generated for that purpose as well. So that being said, even though this might be a particularly drug development oriented conference, if they have 150 funds, so Nordic Life Science Days in November did have 150 funds there. There were many that were crossing multiple sectors or coming specifically for diagnostics, specifically for laboratory services, specifically for enabling technologies that could help them better design or progress in drug development programs. Different types of patient recruitment, retention, remote patient programs, right? There are all these different types of things that investors were specifically looking for. So just to say, some of you might not be within this space, but these conferences are opening up much more than they have been in the past. So it's good timing to at least take a look and consider them if you haven't done so before. I'm going to stop there. Is there anybody else that has other questions?
I'm wondering if Vibeke, if you've had your hands up for a while, do you have a question, Vibeke Årskog, or did you just not put the hand down?
No,
Or did you put the hand down?
There goes.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But Kjell Inge.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting what you're saying, but from experience of, I think your expectation for these bio settings should be a bit limited in terms of this is from my experience something that is a door opener to a connection to a potential partner, and you need to be able also to even if it's expensive, if you go to one, you need to go to 2 and 3. To be able to follow up and how to say make friends out of the connections, because this is, even if you have the greatest technology, at least in your head, introducing it to somebody and have this to really settle down as what they want to do as partnering or putting investment into is nothing that is happening overnight. And also you should not underestimate the social event. If you can grab 1 or 2 of the guys or the connections that you have made during the day in the one-to-one meetings is absolutely of value as well. But I really like what you said about making these pavilions and inviting potential, let's say, pre-qualified investors into that. I think that is something that we should also be more focused on, because that is giving some more power and more trustworthiness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great comment. You've really opened up a can of worms with that one, because there's there's a lot of avenues you can go down at that point. Yes, this is long-term relationship building. It is. It's definitely not a quick fix. It's definitely not an avenue to a quick raise or partnership. It does mean that you need to maximize the effort at one event, but potentially attend multiple events in order to keep the same conversations going. That being said, from personal experience, I will give you one concrete example. The largest deal that I ever made as a tech company, a digital health/medical imaging company, was through going to a BioEurope conference. There were 19 of the largest pharma there. I landed 9 meetings. One of those resulted in a deal. That deal is now 10 years ongoing. So there can be really solid and great things that come out of this that are unexpected. We didn't know we were applicable to drug development at the time.
Yeah, I experienced a bit of the same as just a closing comment, but this is not happening every time.
No, it's not happening every time.
And that also goes to the types of conferences that Chelsea showed in one of the first pictures. And because these huge conferences, you get a lot of meetings at the same time. So you actually can cover a lot of potential leads. But the smaller conferences like Swiss Nordic Bio, which goes in March, now just a month from now, it has a cap of 200 people. And this is actually a conference made for Nordic companies and European investors. So all the investors that come to this meeting know that this is Nordic companies only. That's something of the same on NLS days also. It's larger, but these really, really small meetings, if you know that your investor, the investor you would like to meet, or the investors, if they are at Swiss Nordic Bio, it's an excellent event to actually get some informal discussions, or just informal dialogues.
Kjellinge?
Yeah, as a comment to that as well, you also have this Anglo Nordic in London that is also a smaller event.
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
very focused on the Nordic and meeting the investor environment in UK.
Yeah, that's quite a good one, actually.
And it's not that expensive either.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know a lot of people ask about JP Morgan and some of the parallel conferences that run there, but I would say if you're trying to save your money, don't do that one. We have reached 1 hour. So I want to thank you all very much. Please note that, again, you have 5 clusters here that are working in this space, that are working on this project and working to support you. So if at any point you have any questions about topics that you would like to hear us cover, or specific needs that you have within your financial journey, that's what we're here for. Thank you very much. Very happy to have you here today.
There's been a question to share the presentation afterwards, ladies. Is that fine?
Yes,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so I will send out a link to everyone who registered, to both the recording and to the presentation afterwards.
Thank you for participating, and also for all the great questions and comments.
Thank you.
Thank you all.